At its peak, it was one of the most valuable health tech startups in America. Then it disappeared in a matter of months. And the people who built it said the reason had been hiding in plain sight. For a few years, you could not walk through a healthcare conference without seeing it. A bright purple bus, parked out front, wrapped in 3 enormous words, "Go save healthcare." Behind that bus was a company everyone wanted a piece of. Hospitals signed up. Investors threw money at it. The press called it the future. At its peak, it was worth $4 billion, the highest valued health tech startup of its kind in America. The pitch was clean. An AI workforce, a digital employee that never called in sick, never lost a form, and quietly processed the administrative work that drowns every hospital in the country. There was just one problem. The people who built it and the customers who paid for it said the artificial intelligence wasn't really artificial intelligence. This is the story of Olive. How a purple bus and $1 billion promise fell apart, and what it says about an entire era of health tech hype. Olive was an AI company in name. In practice, critics said it was something much older and far less impressive, wearing a very expensive label. To understand how it pulled that off for so long, and how the label eventually came off, you have to go back to the beginning. Along the way, 3 things need to be answered. What was Olive actually selling? Why did sophisticated investors believe it? And what was really happening behind the screen while everyone was looking at the bus? Olive did not start as Olive. In 2012, in Columbus, Ohio, a former Air Force intelligence officer named Sean Lane founded a company called CrossCHX. The idea was patient identity, linking scattered medical records to a single profile tied to a fingerprint. It was a reasonable idea. It was not a $4 billion idea. Around 2017, the company changed direction. It rebranded as Olive and went after something much larger, the single most hated thing in American medicine: paperwork. Most people don't appreciate how much of US healthcare spending disappears into administration. Not the doctor, not the drug, not the machine, just processing. Claims, insurance checks, denial appeals, forms moving from one desk to another. Estimates put the total administrative cost of American healthcare at over $1 trillion a year. It is a problem that has resisted every attempted solution for decades, and nobody has come close to solving it. And Olive walked in with a straightforward promise. Let our AI handle it. They would build a digital worker. They gave her a name, gave her a personality that could automate the repetitive, low-value tasks that hospital staff burn half their day on. Prior authorizations, claims submissions, insurance eligibility checks. The savings would be real, the efficiency would be measurable, and none of your people would have to touch the work. To a hospital administrator bleeding money on admin costs year after year, that was not a sales pitch. Felt like a way out. Then the timing lined up. Pandemic hit. Every health system suddenly had to run leaner, faster, with fewer people. The word automation started appearing in every budget conversation. And investor money, already cheap before the crisis, was now practically free. Everyone was looking for the next breakout company. Olive could not have asked for better timing. In December 2020, it raised $225 million and was valued at $1.5 billion. 7 months later, it raised another $400 million. The valuation jumped to $4 billion, more than double in under a year without any fundamental change to the business. By 2021, Olive said its software was running in more than 900 hospitals across 40 states, including 20 of the 100 largest health systems in the country. The company had grown to around 1,300 employees and was acquiring other startups. It paid $120 million for a prior authorization company alone. The buzz was everywhere. The coverage was relentless. And almost nobody was asking the obvious question: does this product actually do what they say it does? In April 2022, someone finally did. Erin Brodwin, in her first major investigation for Axios, spoke to 16 people, current and former Olive employees, health tech executives, people who had worked alongside the product. The picture they described did not match the marketing. Olive had told customers to expect savings roughly 5 times the cost of the software. That number was what closed deals. But the reporting found that Olive used rough, internally generated estimates to calculate those savings, only measured real outcomes when a client specifically requested it, and regularly overstated what the product could deliver. The actual results were far below the projections. Hospitals that expected $10 million in value reportedly ended up with less than $2 million. But the more uncomfortable finding was this. Former employees and analysts said the artificial intelligence was, in large part, not. Under the branding, much of Olive turned out to be robotic process automation, an older, simpler technology built on rigid, pre-written rules. When those rules ran into the unpredictable reality of hospital IT systems, real people stepped in behind the screen to fix what the software couldn't handle. Some observers went further, saying it wasn't even sophisticated automation in some cases, just staff doing the work manually, with an AI story attached to the invoice. The digital employee that never slept was, in many cases, a regular employee, working a night shift, cleaning up the errors. To be clear, Olive did provide real services that real hospitals used. This was not a company that sold nothing. But the gap between what they promised and what customers received had grown too wide to manage. One former employee told Axios that some hospitals had stopped considering Olive entirely, because word had gotten around that people had been burned. When a company like this starts slipping, it moves quickly. In July 2022, Olive laid off 450 people. The CEO cited economic conditions and acknowledged missteps. A word that does a lot of work when the gap between promise and delivery is this wide. In February 2023, another 200 were let go. Senior executives started leaving. The company that had been a growth story became a survival story almost overnight. Then came an unusually pointed signal from its home state. In the summer of 2023, Jobs Ohio, Ohio's economic development agency, filed suit against Olive. The state had given the company public support in exchange for a job creation commitment. Olive hadn't met it. Ohio wanted roughly $600,000 back. Olive reportedly never responded to the lawsuit. A company that once promised to save American healthcare did not find it worth responding to a $600,000 lawsuit from the state that helped build it. It ended on October 31st, 2023. Olive announced it was shutting down. It sold its clearinghouse and patient access products to a company called Waystar. Its prior authorization unit, the one it had bought for $120 million, was sold back to a group of former Olive executives for a fraction of that price. A separate unit went to a company called Availity. Everything else was wound down. A company once worth $4 billion liquidated for under $50 million. Olive's collapse did not happen in isolation. The same year, a wave of once celebrated digital health startups folded or contracted sharply. Companies that had raised enormous rounds during the pandemic suddenly had to show actual results. The money was gone, the patience was gone, and the grace period that comes with a hot market had expired. Olive sits at the center of a pattern that predates it and outlasted it. The term now is AI washing. You take ordinary software, scripts, rules, automation tools, sometimes just labor, and you describe it using the language of artificial intelligence. The label inflates the valuation. The underlying product does not change. Not everyone reads Olive as a story about fraud. Some analysts made the argument that the idea was sound and the execution was what failed, that the company grew too fast, promised too much, and lost focus before it could build a product that matched the pitch. That is a fair reading, and it deserves to be taken seriously. Real AI applications in healthcare are advancing. Diagnostic tools, drug discovery, clinical documentation, the category is not discredited by one company's implosion. Both things can be true at the same time. The technology can be real, and specific companies can still exploit the label dishonestly. The actual lesson from Olive is not that AI doesn't work in healthcare. It is that when capital is cheap and a label is in demand, a company can reach a $4 billion valuation before anyone with real accountability has checked whether the product does what the pitch deck says. Olive said it had built a worker that never slept. What never slept, it turned out, was the marketing. The bus is gone. The $4 billion is gone. And somewhere right now, in a pitch deck no one outside the room has seen, another company is using the same language to describe software that is something considerably more ordinary, running the same playbook, drawing the same kind of investor interest, and watching the valuation respond accordingly. The question is not whether the next Olive is out there. The question is just which one gets exposed first.